All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And one, I just want to thank you all for coming out this evening to the African American Community Service Agency as we're having our Meet the Candidates Forum for our District 3 race. So, one thing that we really do want to happen is really for people to understand that the importance of voting. And really being able to have candidates in front of you that are able to speak to what they want to do, and for you able to hear it from them, and also the opportunity to ask questions as well if time is allowed. So thank you all for coming out here. In addition, I just want to let you all know we do have restrooms here. We do have 2 restrooms behind us, so it's going to be to the left and to the right in the hallway if you need to use it. There is food and beverages in the room across the hall as well. So at any point you all need to get that, feel free to do so. So yeah, again, thank you all for being in this space, and then I'll now pass it to Shannon.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Well, we're starting now, and I want to let everyone know that this will be recorded. So thank you so much for joining us today. I want to first thank AACSA for allowing us into their space. This is the SVCN and AACSA's nonprofit candidate forum, sponsored by the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. I'm Shannon Zhang. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Fellow at SVCN, and today we're joined by 2 candidates for the District 3 seat of the San Jose City Council. As an organization, SVCN hosts these candidate fora to provide nonprofit leaders with the opportunity to learn more about these candidates, their ideas, visions, and priorities. Today we'll focus our discussion on issues that impact nonprofits as community-based service providers, government contractors, and advocates. And as a continuing SVCN practice, I want to acknowledge that we're currently on the Muwekma Ohlone tribe unceded lands. Together, let us commit to educating ourselves and advocating for indigenous peoples and all communities that have been neglected and displaced by U.S. government and other colonial powers. Before we get started, I'd like to take a quick second to thank our sponsor, Choose Children, an initiative of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. SVCF empowers and provides resources to community-based organizations to initiate systemic change, and we couldn't have put this event on without them. So thank you so much to SVCF and Choose Children. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all the other sponsoring organizations who are here today. Thank you so much for showing up, turning folks out, and everything you do for your community. So if you're from one of these orgs, please cheer. Yay! Everyone should also be sure to check out the Register of Voters table in the back. And just to check if you're registered, want to check on your registration status, and if you want a cool sticker, they also have very cool stickers. We've already stolen several. So those are all the fun orgs and the Register of Voters who are here. So to kick things off, I'd like to introduce our moderator today, Tori Gaines. Tori is a reporter for KTVU. She started in the news at a San Francisco television station where she covered everything from self-driving tech to breaking news. Tori hails from Montana, but she made California her home when, after going to Claremont McKenna College and building deep connections with the Bay Area community while reporting on local news. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Tori.
Thank you, Shannon, and welcome candidates. Thank you so much for being here today. Now, before we begin, I'll be explaining the ground rules regarding the timing and format for today's forum. Candidates, you will each have up to 1.5 minutes for opening statements. Afterwards, I will be asking a series of both sponsor-submitted and audience pre-submitted questions. You both will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question, plus an optional 1 minute each for rebuttal. Do we got it? Okay, great. If you will be taking the rebuttal, please pause for a moment to let our staff change the timer. Now, during the forum, we will be including a lightning round of questions, which will be a mixture of fun topics that will require a yes or no answer, or a response of 1 sentence or less. After asking a few more questions, we will finish up by having each candidate share their closing statements, which they will have up to 1.5 minutes each to do. Now, throughout the forum, candidates will be speaking on a rotating basis to ensure that each of you has a fair opportunity to speak first or last. And one final note to both of you, please remember to be respectful to one another and of the time limits allotted with each answer. For your convenience, we will have a timer located on a screen in the front row, right here, perfect. So you can visually see how much time remains for each question. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our candidates. We have Gabby Chavez-Lopez and Anthony Tordillos. I'd like to welcome both of you. Now let's begin with opening statements. You'll each have 1.5 minutes each, and we'll be starting with Gabby.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Gabby Chavez-Lopez, and I am proud to be running to be your next city council member representing District 3. I moved to downtown District 3 in 2002 when my father got a job here, and I was in high school, and San Jose seemed like the big city to me. And I came from Fresno, California originally, and for me, San Jose has always represented opportunity and possibility. And as I've gone through the district, that's echoed across a lot of the conversations that I've had with folks is that this place has been an incredible place of opportunity for so many families like mine, and I want to make sure that it continues to be a place that people can build their future here, they can raise their children here, they can think about contributing and giving back to the community in meaningful ways. And so I am incredibly honored to be running because I believe in the power of opportunity, the strength of our community, and the importance of real results-driven leadership that is values-based. And so I have served this community for many years and have led with my values, led with my convictions, and led with so many of you in this room that are committed to making sure that all boats rise. And I envision a downtown and a District 3 that works for all of us, not just the few, and that we focus on those that are most marginalized and are closest and most impacted by a lot of the issues that we're dealing with front and center here in our district. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Gabby. Now, Anthony, Mr. Tordillos.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Anthony Tordillos. I'm an engineer, a planning commissioner, and a neighborhood president here in downtown San Jose. And I'm so excited to be running for the District 3 council seat because I want to focus on rebuilding trust with our local community and delivering results for the people of District 3. I grew up in a working class family in Washington State, and growing up, my family relied on government programs like disability insurance to get by, so I learned at a really early age how important it is to have a government that actually works to uplift working families like the one I grew up in. I'm also proud to say that my mother has worked in the nonprofit sector for over 25 years, so I've seen firsthand the important work that all of our nonprofit leaders and organizations do to uplift our community. I currently serve as chair of the San Jose Planning Commission, and in that role I've worked with city staff to advance policies to promote affordability, address our housing crisis, and prevent displacement of our working families. I also serve as president of the South University neighborhood over by San Jose State, and in that role I've worked to bring people together to help clean up our streets, invest in public art projects, and hold free events to help our neighbors come together and build community. On council, I really want to combine that direct public policy expertise from my time on the Planning Commission with a focus on community outreach and neighborhood engagement so we can make sure that we're dealing with every single challenge the city is facing, from our housing and homelessness crisis to providing economic opportunity for our residents with the urgency that our residents deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Now, candidates, thank you both for your opening statements. We will now begin with our Q&A period with our first question. Now, in February, the city budget study session on unsheltered homelessness priced interim shelter costs at $255 million for one-time capital cost and $234 million for operating costs. This expanded shelter project is largely funded through Measure E, affordable housing dollars, and contributes to the city's budget deficit. What is your perspective on the balance between affordable housing and interim shelter as solutions to homelessness, and what revenue sources would you like to see the city explore for affordable housing and homelessness prevention? We'll go with Anthony first.
Thank you. I'm a firm believer that we need to be investing on both ends of the spectrum here, both short-term solutions to provide immediate relief to all of our unsheltered neighbors, but also keeping a focus on investing in affordable housing and supportive housing over the long term. I'm a firm believer that affordable housing, an abundance of affordable and supportive housing, is the only long-term solution to our homelessness crisis. That said, we can look at the data and see that even after all of the shelter capacity that is currently in the pipeline from the city of San Jose and Santa Clara County is complete, that we will still have over 3,000 members of our community living on our streets without access to shelter, even if they are ready to move into one of these interim shelters. So I think we need to focus on building up that shelter capacity so that we have the beds to offer folks who are desperate to get off of our streets and into care and into shelter. I also believe that we need a spectrum of solutions that matches the diversity of our homeless population. So I'm a big supporter of programs like safe sleeping sites and safe parking sites, so we can meet our residents where they are and get them connected, that first step off the streets, and then from there connected to services, connected to healthcare, and hopefully connected to long-term affordable housing as the only, again, permanent solution to homelessness. Oh, and then in terms of funding sources, I think that we need to move back towards a world in which we have a balanced allocation of Measure E dollars so that we can continue to invest at the city level in affordable housing. And I would love to see the city of San Jose work with our partners in county and regional government on a new housing bond so that we can invest in affordable and supportive housing at the scale required to solve this crisis.
Thank you. And Gabby?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I was one of the leaders on the Measure E campaign that generated over $125 million in affordable housing funds that we get to talk about and utilize today. So I think bringing resources to our community is something that I've always been focusing on first, because we can have a lot of great ideas, but if we can't fund them and implement them correctly with the right partners and have the right buy-in, then it's just an idea and a concept. And so I think I have been very vocal about Measure E because I was so invested in talking to voters and making sure that they understood what that funding was intended for, which is permanent supportive housing. So I'm always going to be leaning on the side of that. But I understand that there are interim and emergency situations and crises like we face today with the economy being what it is. Obviously, I will never talk about housing without talking about prevention. So I know that wasn't asked, but it's something to really think about when we think about cost measures and what is ultimately a good investment in keeping people housed and in stable situations. And so I think that, as we look at different measures, commercial linkage fees is something we've done before. Also looking at, office conversions into housing supply, vacancy tax. I think everything really needs to be on the table. Obviously, I supported the regional housing bond measure, not only personally, but through my organization as well, because we know that housing and access to housing is foundational for any healthy community. And so I think in terms of sustainability, I run a nonprofit agency, so any investment that I make, I'm thinking through that choice and what it's going to mean 5-10 years down the line. And even though permanent supportive is costly, it exists 100 years from now, and not having to be repaired time and time again. And so I think that, especially during tough times, we do have to not stop talking about prevention either. So thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. This is an opportunity for either of you to have a rebuttal. Would you like a rebuttal, Anthony? No? Gabby? Nope. Okay. On to the next question. Number 2. Over the past few months, Mayor Matt Mahan has been pushing a policy to arrest unhoused individuals who refuse shelter 3 times or violate a, quote, encampment code of conduct. At the public safety study session on May 12th, the City Council learned of a new iteration of this plan, which creates a new police unit forced on encampments. Now, the Council will be voting on this proposal next month. Are you supportive of any iteration of the mayor's plan to utilize the police force to bring people who refuse shelter inside? And how do you think the city should handle people who turn down shelter? We'll be starting with Gabby first.
Sure. So I do not, I always get like a visceral reaction every time I hear about this solution. I always have. I do not support any type of policing of our unhoused residents into shelters. For any of us that have actually delivered services and programs to people on the ground, we know that punitive measures like this are not a real solution and actually affect people long term, are more costly, and cause more trauma. And so that's not something that I would ever endorse. And so, of course, I support trauma-informed outreach, talking with the county. The fact that we're not even discussing this with the county is another red flag for me, because they have a lot of the support services that folks need, quite frankly, to be uplifted in this moment. And so I think shelter refusals need to be addressed through dignity, and we need to ask, why are they saying no? There could be a plethora of reasons why, but making sure that I think additional policing, again, is not a real effective solution. And so I think we need to look at, other options for folks, and the county being a real partner and a real service provider there is going to be key. The fact that we're asking police to stop addressing violent crime and all these things, become social workers, housing navigators, it just goes beyond me. They're not trained for that. And so I think that it's not setting them up for success either in that situation, quite frankly. And we should be very concerned about police response times and their attention being redirected in places where it shouldn't be. And it's about the right response at the right time for the right situation. And so all around, I'm not in support of any iteration of this plan.
Thank you. Anthony?
Thank you. No, I do not support criminalization of homelessness, and I do not believe that anyone who is living on our streets should be arrested for the supposed crime of being unhoused. I really try to look at this from a data-based perspective here. And you can look at the data and see that the vast majority of unhoused individuals who are offered shelter take the city up on those offers of shelter, anywhere from 70 to 90%. So if we look at our homelessness crisis, to me that says that the most effective thing that we can do in the short term to help make progress here is to invest in our shelter system and making sure that everyone who is on the streets, desperate for a sheltered bed, looking for those resources to be able to come indoors and be connected with wraparound services and care, has the opportunity to do so. So I believe that we should invest in growing our shelter system, and again, balance those investments with continued investment in long-term affordable and supportive housing, so that we have the resources to move those folks into something more permanent when their time in a shelter comes to a close. I also think that we, again, as I said earlier, need to invest in a spectrum of solutions here, like safe parking and safe sleeping sites, so that we have lower barrier to entry options for folks. I think it's the case that not everyone who is living in an RV or in an encampment may be ready to take that first step directly into supportive housing, or not necessarily even into an emergency interim shelter. So having solutions that meet folks where they are, I think, is going to be really key here. I do think that there will always be that subset of folks who may be service resistant for a variety of reasons. I think it's important to engage with them, understand their concerns and what is acting as a blocker to prevent them from getting into housing and shelter. But I think we need to engage with them with compassion and in good faith. I also think that for some folks, this may be a case where there is some degree of underlying mental health care or addiction, struggle that is acting as a barrier to their entry into shelter. And for those cases, I think the city should focus on mental health care outreach, making sure that we can provide folks with the care that they need.
Thank you. And now you each have an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal. Gabby first. Do you have anything for a rebuttal? Anthony? No? Okay. We will move on to question number 3. San Jose and its residents face significant uncertainty from the federal administration's actions targeting immigrants, religious minorities, and the LGBTQ+ community. This year, the city has enacted a resolution affirming its commitment to protecting its immigrant community. The mayor's March budget message also recommends allocating $200,000 to $250,000 for immigrant support services. Now, what commitments would you make as a council member to ensure San Jose invests in immigrant protection, such as removal and legal defense? And what actions would you take to protect other targeted communities? We'll be going with Anthony first.
Thank you. First, I'll just say that San Jose really is a city of immigrants. Over 40% of our population was born abroad. And I think our immigrant community contributes so much, both to the economy of our city, but also to our culture and to the unique fabric that makes San Jose such a special place to be. I was proud to come out in support of the sanctuary city policy at the rally at City Hall when this came before council earlier this year. And on council, I will continue to uphold our sanctuary city policies and fight to make sure that we are funding new things like legal aid for our immigrant community who are under attack from the Trump administration. The worst, I fear, is yet to come with this administration, so we need leaders who are going to stand up to the federal government and do everything in our power to protect our local community. I think it's important to note, as you said, that it's not just the immigrant community that is under new fire from the Trump administration. I know that there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in our LGBTQ plus community as well right now, and particularly all of the trans members of our community. We've seen that Republicans have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in recent years on attack ads demonizing trans people, and already in the first few months of the Trump administration, we've seen our trans brothers and sisters have their rights stripped away by this administration. I think that this is particularly hitting close to home in District 3, given that at San Jose State, the national spotlight has really been shined on our district in terms of the ongoing battle over trans athletes in sports. So I was proud to speak up in defense of student athletes at San Jose State when Gavin Newsom, frankly, attempted to pivot to the center for political reasons and throw trans people under the bus in the process. I will always be standing with all marginalized people in our community, and that includes our trans community in this very difficult time.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about, what I've done in my capacity, and I think it informs a lot of what I think we need to continue to do, and my lessons learned through the pandemic. I think our community-based organizations are trusted sources of information. Many of us stood up and made sure that we were getting good information to our communities at all times during the crisis that was the pandemic. I think now it is in the hands of, in many ways, the government can do so much, but we also need trusted messengers out in the community, like our nonprofit partners, and trusted sources of information to make sure that folks are knowing about the resources that they have available to them. One of the things that we did as an organization is we led a Know Your Rights training very early on. I think the first couple days of the Trump administration, part two, because we were protecting immigrants during Trump 1. And we had 100 participants, 100 community-based organizations participate and make sure that they were building out the capacity to serve the needs of this emerging issue, which is all too familiar. I think as it relates to the funding, when I hear $250,000, when we've heard the data point about how many folks in our community, this is an immigrant city, this is an immigrant community, $250,000 doesn't seem like much to go around, quite frankly. My budget at my organization is 4 times that much, and we serve 1,000 people. So I think I think there needs to be more investment there. I am in support, definitely, of legal defense and continued support of our rapid response network. I think it's been effective and a great way to make sure that we're spreading information. And we need to really, again, I want to cite the county's leadership in this space. They just came out with the One County, One Future campaign, which is a marketing campaign, but it shouldn't be just one county, one future. It should be one city, one future, all of us, because our county represents San Jose as well. So standing with our county partners in those moments really is going to make a difference.
Thank you, and you both have an opportunity for rebuttal. Would you like to use it this time? All right, question number 4. Thank you for those answers. Thank you for those answers, candidates. We're going to shift to our lightning round questions at this time. There will be a series of quick questions, each to be answered in a yes or no, or a response of 1 sentence or less. Now we're going to start with Gabby, and we're going to alternate between for each question. And the first question is, are we ready with timers? We're good? Okay, great. The first question is, what is your favorite public park in District 3?
St. James, because it's the closest to my house, and I love that it's activated in the summer now with music.
I'd have to say O'Donnell Gardens Park. It's our local neighborhood park where we hold all of our neighborhood association community events.
All right, and what artists or podcasts have you been listening to recently?
I've had Doechii on repeat all year.
We'll allow that. And Gabby?
Lizzo.
And what was the last book that you read, Gabby?
Goodness, gosh, I haven't read in a while. I think it was Ron Gonzalez's book that he gave me when running for office. It's like, I can't think of, Life in the Fishbowl, because when I told him I was going to run, he was like, here, read this. I wrote it. So I did get to read that before I decided to run.
Anthony?
Like Gabby, it's been many months since I've had time to read, so struggling to remember what the last book was. I'll say that the book that's on my shelf waiting to be read is Abundance.
Thank you both. And what is your favorite restaurant, store, or other business in District 3?
My go-to place for a night out with my husband is Club on Post.
Just because it makes my son so happy, Monato's in Japantown. He loves that place.
Thank you both. We will be taking a short break to let in any folks who arrived late, and we will resume in a few minutes. Thank you, guys. All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Here we go. Welcome back, everyone. We will be resuming with our regularly scheduled program. Now, the city, this next question, number 4, here we go. The city has previously invested in several community safety and violence prevention efforts. These initiatives include partnering with nonprofit providers through BEST, B-E-S-T, for violence prevention and intervention services for youth and providing alternatives to police response through the TRUST program. Now, last year, the city funded TRUST at $450,000, and now opioid settlement funds can be a full funding source for the program, meaning the general fund will not be impacted. So the question is, what ideas or commitments do you have to expand public education around trust, and how should the city balance investments between preventative non-police alternative response programs and downstream approaches such as policing or co-response? We will be starting with Gabby.
So yeah, I think another thing to think about is like, how do we leverage resources, right, in times where they are limited? And one thing that, again, I think learning through the pandemic and seeing that city-county collaboration with kind of shared vision around how are we going to support those most impacted in this moment. You know, I was highly engaged in the advocacy around bringing trust to the city of San Jose. I think where we missed the mark, quite frankly, and we do this a lot, is missing the mark on the actual implementation and community buy-in that has to happen. Because I go out into the neighborhoods and they don't even know about trust, they don't even know where to call, what to do. And so I think that we need to make sure that as we're funding these pilot programs, that we're thinking about proper implementation, that we're thinking about how are we marketing these services outward. The other thing, as I was talking to some SURGE members, that they also brought to my attention was that trust as a mental health service provider isn't just for our houseless residents. It's for anybody experiencing a mental health crisis who may also be housed. And so not getting lost in that nuance, I think, is going to be very important as we think about meeting the needs of everyone in our community. And so culturally relevant programming and implementation is going to be key. We know how many multiple languages are spoken in the city of San Jose, so making sure that people know about this program, that they feel like it's accessible to them and their communities is going to be really important. And, you know, making sure that, again, that there is good funding models, and the way that that happens is through partnership. And so when people complain all the time that the city and the county haven't partnered, I'm like, we forget very quickly that they did incredible things during a crisis of the magnitude of the pandemic and came together, shared resources, marshaled them in appropriate places. And so I believe that we can do that again in this instance.
Thank you. I'm a long-time supporter of the TRUST program. I think it's a great way to make sure that we are responding to incidents of mental health crisis with trained professionals who are, you know, experts in de-escalating these situations and connecting folks to care. I think the big issue that we've identified here is that there's a lack of public awareness of all of these new tools. You know, a big focus of my campaign has been engaging with neighborhoods all across District 3. And on council, I would love to leverage all of our amazing neighborhood associations to help educate our neighborhoods and community partners about trust and the 988 number. Beyond that, I would say that I'm a big advocate for investing in the city's 911 diversion program. That way we don't necessarily even need our community members to know about the 988 number. And calls involving mental health care crisis will still be able to be routed to a trust responder without that additional education. system, which I think will be a game changer. I think it's also important that moving forward we have that balanced investment between our police force and our non-police alternative responder programs. It's interesting, I actually had a conversation with some officers the other day, and they were speaking about how much of a big supporters they were of the Trust program. I think, at least based on the officers that I talked to, they were bought into this vision of having different types of responders with different types of training, responding to different types of calls, and they made the exact same point that we've already talked about here, that, if we can get a trust responder to respond to some of these calls, if we can get all other civilian responders like the Community Service Officers program within SJPD to respond to some lower priority quality of life calls, that all takes work off of our sworn police force, which we know is understaffed and overworked, and that'll help us to hopefully better leverage the police resources that we do have, bring down response times, and start to rebuild trust with our local community that the police will actually be there when our residents need them most.
Thank you, and you now each have an opportunity for 1 minute rebuttal. Anyone? Okay. Question number 5. The nonprofit Racial Equity Action Leadership, or REAL, coalition has been meeting since June 2020 to advocate for a more racially just and equitable society. In May of 2024, after years of collaboration with REAL, the City Council unanimously adopted the Racial and Social Equity Ordinance and the Equity Values and Standards Policy, codifying a commitment to a just and equitable San Jose into the city charter. A critical component of advancing racial justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion is involving in leadership and decision-making individuals with lived experiences of racial inequity, justice system involvement, disability-based discrimination, and other harms. The question is, what is currently missing from the city's efforts to advance racial equity, and what will you do to include community voices in policy decisions that directly impact those who face historical race-based inequities? We'll start with Anthony first.
Thank you. One thing that in my mind is missing from a lot of our discussions about racial equity and other types of equity, frankly, is just the way that these are intersectional issues with a lot of different areas of public policy. I serve on the Planning Commission. We often review housing infill projects, and we often get folks from the community out who are opposed to these projects, who have concerns about height or density or traffic, concerns that are often well-founded. But it's interesting that we don't often make the connection between what this project means to other people who are not in those rooms. We know that our BIPOC population is severely overrepresented in terms of, our residents who are experiencing severe housing and rent burden. So to the extent that we can actually tie together these other areas of policy and help our residents understand the impacts that these have on racial equity and racial justice, I think that'll help us to build some of the coalitions to be more effective in some of these different areas. And that doesn't just apply to housing, it applies to transit access, it applies to displacement, it applies to economic mobility. So we need to make sure that we are helping to draw those connective lines between all of these different issues. In terms of what I would like to do moving forward, I would like the city to be much more proactive in terms of our outreach strategies. On the Planning Commission, again, we had a recent project that came before the commission, and my vice chair, probed a little bit in terms of the outreach work that the city had done. And he kind of identified that, there had been outreach to a bunch of different community organizations, but there'd been no outreach to the African American community in the surrounding area. So moving forward, I would love to see the city adopt, a stronger playbook with dedicated partners within our community, making sure that we have diverse voices in all of these rooms, and that people who historically have not had much of a voice in City Hall actually have a seat at the table when it comes to public policy that's going to be impacting them.
Yeah, so I think societal context is really important, and timing of many of these conversations. And I think considering what's happening at our federal level, it is trickling down to our local level. And so we need to think about how that impacts marginalized communities, how that impacts folks that are experiencing all different types of issues on the ground. And so as somebody who has been involved in the REAL Coalition over the last 4 or 5 years, now on the steering committee, many of the things that we have championed and many of the things that I believe in are removing those barriers and those roadblocks to how come, working people can't participate in a community meeting? What are those challenges, whether it's access to childcare, whether it's access to, speaking multiple languages and being able to engage? And I think we make it really difficult. And I look around the room and see some leaders in this room that have made it their charge to really make civics more engaging and more accessible to all communities and communities of color that have historically been blocked from participating for a variety of reasons. And so, some of the things that we've done in supporting the Office of Racial Equity is making sure that they have funding, that they have teeth in some of the things that they are proposing, and that they're able to do, equity audits. One of the things we were working on prior to me even deciding to run for office is we were looking at a pay equity study in the city of San Jose to look at the intersections of folks being paid different wages, because I don't know if you all know this, but Silicon Valley is the epicenter of the wage gap for women of color. And so asking ourselves why and what we can do as a city and as an employer to make sure that we are looking across our own, just the things that we can control to make sure that communities of color aren't being left out.
Thank you both. Opportunity for a rebuttal? Okay. Next question. Today, if a family living in San Jose has one infant and a preschooler, they can expect to pay on average over $47,000 per year on childcare, and that is if they can find it. We know that the lack of affordable childcare options leads to underemployment and increases vulnerabilities in housing, employment, and economic opportunities. On December 12th, 2023, the San Jose City Council unanimously passed a resolution declaring the city's commitment to affordable childcare. Now, as a city council member and the representative for District 3, what steps will you take to improve and expand access to affordable childcare?
Amazing. So I have been a vocal advocate on expanded parental leave at the city of San Jose. And that was actually my first demand, I guess, of our mayor as an advocate when I came in and he was saying, what's important to the community. I said that we need to make sure that at the time, the city of San Jose did not have parental leave. And so we know that that is a huge barrier for someone to be able to advance and take that time and be able to continue in their career at the city of San Jose. So again, it's starting first with us and looking at that. Thanks to IFPTE and other bargaining units, they were able to get that benefit. But I think we should all care about workers having these benefits, such as access to childcare and paid parental leave, because at the end of the day, that retains quality employees, that remains that our city can be competitive against other cities, right, to be able to offer those benefits. So I think that has been really important. One of the other things that I have done and I will continue to do is make sure to partner with our federal leaders, our state leaders. It tends to be a bipartisan issue, which is exciting because we don't have many of those in our country. And so access to childcare is something that is usually supported by both parties. And so figuring out that in this time, maybe there is this silver lining of being able to find some funding and support for childcare resources and access. Another thing is making sure that our childcare providers can provide that care and are getting fair wages and can even live here, because my son had to move 3 different times because his care center kept closing down for financial reasons, right? And so I think there's also zoning reform that can happen at the city of San Jose to make it easier for people to open child care centers. Simplified licensing is another big area of concern, and just being able to do that and partnering with CBOs and our community colleges makes it a lot more accessible for people to be able to open up child care centers. And we do have a child care desert in downtown San Jose, so I think it's imperative that we figure that one out soon.
Thank you. Childcare really I view as, fundamental public infrastructure. It's obviously critical for supporting our, youngest residents in our community during those first early years of life, but it's also really important so that all of the working parents in our community are able to actually participate in our economy and advance their own careers. So I think it's important that we focus on this issue of affordable childcare. It's been a challenge in the past couple of years. Over 700 daycare facilities in Santa Clara County closed in the past decade, which is, contributing contributing to this limit and capacity to quality childcare. I'm a big supporter of some of the recent initiatives that the City Council has taken. They had a $1 million grant program recently to provide business and technology support to some of our daycare operators, particularly in low-income communities, to help to digitize their operations, make them more efficient, help them out with technology, all with the aims of hopefully allowing these daycare centers to operate at higher capacities so that we can make use of the facilities that we do have while increasing the availability of care for everyone in our community. Also big supporter of all of the city-led programs that we have here, like our after-school programs and our daycare or our preschool programs. So we'll continue to support those on City Council and also support funding for PRNS so that they can maintain their scholarship programs so that low-income families have cost-free access to all of these programs. Kind of moving up the age ladder, also a supporter of our youth centers, our teen centers, as providing really critical infrastructure for all of our young people who may be not quite as young, so that they have safe places to go, kind of in the gap between the end of the school day and when their parents might be coming home from work. And then finally, I think that in terms of equitable access to city business, we need to make sure that all of our city meetings, city council meetings, public community meetings have access to on-site childcare so that all parents in our community can participate in that process.
Thank you both. Would either of you like the opportunity for rebuttal? Nope. Okay. Question number 7. As you know, San Jose is situated within Santa Clara County, which is governed by the Board of Supervisors. Now, lately, there has been conversation at both the city and county levels about how the council and board can work together on issues like homelessness, trust, and transportation. The question is, what do you view as the role of San Jose as compared to Santa Clara County, and what steps would you take to ensure resources are being maximized by the city and county and they collaborate rather than compete?
Sure. So historically, the city has been focused on kind of core constituent services and infrastructure, things like our roads, garbage, public safety, fire, police, as well as core land use decisions and all of the regulations that govern both land use, housing, and business development within the city. Whereas the county has been focused on our social safety net programs, our healthcare, our criminal justice system, and generally homelessness and mental health care services. I would say that those are not strict divisions, and we've seen degrees of overlap over the years, and we're also seeing some shifting lines there. I think the best example is homelessness, which has traditionally been more in the county's domain, but recently the city has been investing more in growing our shelter capacity. I think that this is a great example that just highlights the importance of that collaboration between our city government and our county government. The city may fund an emergency interim shelter site that they operate, but they will still depend on county workers and homelessness outreach advocates to help get people into that facility and provide on-site services at these facilities and connection to longer-term case management and supportive housing on the other side. So this model does not work if we are not collaborating across the different levels of government. I think that holds true for other policy areas as well. Obviously, VTA, our transit system in Santa Clara County, has stakeholders from the county as well as from the city, and there are interesting overlaps in terms of their relative domains there. The city generally leads the charge on housing development, infill development, but if we want to support our transit system, it's important that we make sure that these transit-oriented developments are really maximizing the use of our land adjacent to the VTA lines and VTA stations. So there's obviously a lot of areas here where the city and the county need to be able to work together. I think we've seen at times a butting of heads between our city leaders and our county leaders, so we need to be striving for collaboration that'll help us to work more effectively, use public dollars more efficiently, and deliver the best quality services to our residents.
This is an issue I've been thinking a lot about because when I'm out there talking to folks, they bring it up like it shouldn't be our job to figure out who's and doing what and where the line is drawn and where this is now the county's issue and the city's issue. So I think it's incumbent upon us as city and county leaders. That's going to be the expectation, that we don't put the onus on community members to figure out who's doing what, when, and where. And so how that becomes streamlined is that we need to be in constant communication. The thing we share in common is that we are serving all the same residents. And at the end of the day, we mutually care about what their quality of life looks like. And now that the definition of, who's doing what is sort of defined, I see also in the space of, just going into a whole new direction is, the space of economic development. And how do we bring in revenue to our city and our county, because the county and the city both benefit from that. So I think that we need to do a lot more proactive outreach when we think about partnering. As I know, as a nonprofit leader and partnering with any other agency, you don't go into the room already having the plan and then asking your partner to pay for it, right? That's not how it goes. You go in, you co-create those plans, you share strategies, because when you have different strategies, a lot of money is lost in the process and it's not utilized in the best way possible. So again, I have great relationships with our county supervisors. All 5 of them are endorsing me and supporting me in this race, because they know that I roll up my sleeves and I deliver time and time again. And I've modeled through decades of leadership that I'm a good partner. And I think that that trust and that inherent support is going to be needed at all levels of government and in all different jurisdictions in order to be able to deliver to the residents. And so it's not the onus being put on them. It's incumbent upon us to figure it out.
Thank you both, and this is your final opportunity for a rebuttal. Would either of you like to take it? No? Okay. And now on to the fun part, guys. We will now open up the floor for audience questions. So please raise your hand if you have a question for the candidates, and we will bring you a microphone. I see a few hands already. I think we have a second microphone coming. I could be wrong. There it is. Okay, we'll bring you the microphone. Hold on. Perfect. We're gonna go right here. Thank you.
So I'm curious what your position is on.
Is it on?
I'm loud.
Good. Thank you,
So,
Steve.
I'm curious what your position is on rent control. When you say that you want to represent everybody in D3, there's renters, there's owners, and there's a lot of mom and pops which are getting hit really hard right now with a lot of expenses. Tenants are getting hit hard, and property owners are getting hit hard, getting hit even harder. So where are you coming from on that? Because I know that some of the endorsements are from previous council members that pushed hard rent control in the city.
Thank you, Steve. Take that one. We're dancing. I'm not sure who went first last time. We're going to go Gabby first this time. We'll come to you next.
Sure. So all of those identities that you called out, Steve, I mean, I've been a renter in San Jose for, 15 years. Now I'm a homeowner. I do have a rental property as well, so I guess, a mom and pop. I rent my house out to make ends meet. So I understand it from all vantage points. I really do. And fundamentally, I think that all of the options have to be on the table. As we saw the last go round, the realtors came hard at me because they know that I am ultimately open to making sure that we expand rent controls when needed, especially during times when costs are skyrocketing. We know this. And so that to me is something that is important, and we have to think about. We have to think about sharing that. I think that power, we have to think about sharing those resources as much as possible, because everybody's getting squished. And so, I mean, I can empathize with all parties involved, but I am in support of it. But again, it is a timing issue as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. You know, this is a complicated issue. I support San Jose's existing rent stabilization ordinance to make sure that we are limiting rent increases on older properties, but I don't support expanding rent control to new construction, because I think all of the data that we have shows that our housing affordability crisis is fundamentally due to a housing shortage. And I fear that expanding rent control to new construction will just act as a further barrier to constructing the housing that our community desperately needs. So I have a lot of plans in the works for how we can build our way out of this crisis and ultimately bring down costs for all of our families. But I fear that if we look at too aggressive of an approach with rent control, including expanding it to new construction, that we're going to make the problem worse, not better, because we're going to stop housing construction in its tracks. So thank you.
Thank you. And hands up again. I think I saw a few back here. We're going to go to Ms. Ellen.
I'm so glad to see you here. And in this space. I got here 2 years after the space was built. And so when I got here, there was no other African-American centered space. And today, there's really no other still today. And we're continuing to fight for that. When Cindy was city council member, I was coordinator of the after-school program. And boxes would show up during all the different seasons. And it would say, from your district. And we never asked for it. So with that care that we've managed to still be here, where are you in that?
Thank you. You know, I think we do need to make sure that we are supporting people in our community and preventing displacement. It's been a top priority of mine on the Planning Commission. We've passed some local policies to prevent displacement, specifically of working families, and trying to preserve our most affordable housing stock so that we can make sure that we have affordable home ownership opportunities that continue to exist for all of our community members in San Jose. You know, we've seen a lot of groups over the years pushed out of our city as we have failed to tackle our housing affordability crisis. I think the city really needs to start thinking bigger and acting with more urgency so that we can get this crisis under control and prevent displacement of everyone in our community.
Yeah, I think centering culture and identity is something that is incredibly empowering to any community. And this is the closest community center to my house. And I know that this is a place that welcomes all people, but is also very much celebrates the Black community and the Black struggle and the Black history in this community, and is a meeting place for all of us. We're doing the Black and Brown Get Down. We're here for all these different things. And for me, it's a place to build relationships, and it's a place to build community connections. So AACSA has always been a very special place to me personally. The leadership of Milan Valentin has been something that I've always aspired to doing, because for me, Milan leads for all people, and at the end of the day centers Black experience and voices in so many of those conversations. And so, I think being a nonprofit leader, having your finger on the pulse and knowing what the community needs even before they know they need it is something that's a very important quality of anyone who is serving this community.
Doing okay on time? Okay. Okay. I saw a young lady over here in the middle.
Thank you. So my question is, what do you bring to the table that is different from our current council members that are already serving?
Yeah, I think this is a very easy question for me, because it has been frustrating, quite frankly, that I would be actually the only sitting council person out of 10 that is currently raising a young family in the city of San Jose. And I think that experience, that lived experience, is something that when we talk about policies, when we talk about programs, I miss the days when people would bring up, well, what about our families? What about our young kids? What about our youth? Because yes, they're not voters, but they're constituents. They're going to be my constituents. And so I think that it's really important that that identity and that experience is centered around all of these conversations we have that are going to impact. There are so many families, young families in this district, because I've met them and they want to engage. And I think when we make a family-friendly downtown, and it's good for families, then it's good for all of us, because it's safe, it's vibrant, it's thinking about our youngest community members. And so I think that, and also being an employer in our downtown. I also run an agency on 2nd and Santa Clara, so that is also a very unique experience to be an employer in our downtown core as well.
I'm a big believer that the way that elected officials actually enact positive change in our communities is via public policy. And I think that my public policy background is, one of the differentiating factors of what I could actually contribute in terms of value on city council. Throughout this process, I've talked with a lot of elected officials, and I had one conversation that really stuck with me with a council member, which was that they kind of begrudgingly acknowledged that we have a housing crisis, that things are too expensive, and then they turned around and said, but there's nothing city council can do about that. Which I had to do a double take because, in my mind, it is city council's job to be solving these problems, and you solve these problems with public policy. I have experience doing so from my time on the Planning Commission. Another example, city council approved our housing element without modifications, protest of many housing advocates in our community. I spoke out against it at the time, and I worked with city staff for 6 months to strengthen that housing plan after council adopted it and secured additional streamlining for affordable housing development and a commitment to rezone for 20,000 units of new multifamily housing. So I think that public policy and a focus on public policy is what I bring.
Thank you. Thank you all for your answers. We're going to have a tsunami of federal cuts that is going to affect the safety net. It's going to affect Medi-Cal. It's going to affect services to children. It's going to affect SNAP and housing. So while you have policies that you're thinking about today, I haven't heard anything that really is thinking about what's going to happen in the future and how we're going to need to pivot as a community to deal with the onslaught of cuts that we're going to experience, particularly for low-income individuals and people who are living on the margins. And so I'd like to hear from both of you. What are you thinking about how we're going to have to navigate this new landscape, and what kind of ideas you have to combat them?
Thank you for the question. It's obviously very important and very timely with everything going on in the federal government right now. I would say that in my short term, a lot of the policies that I'm focused on are focused on getting the city out of the way and lowering costs. Things that don't necessarily require upfront investment from the city, but can have a disproportionate impact on outcomes. So I think that that's one way that the city council can continue to go to bat for our community, even if funding is disappearing. That said, we know that there is a lot of federal money on the line, both at the city level and at the county level. So we're going to need to be nimble in the years ahead. We're going to need to work with all of our partners in the nonprofit sector, in the state government, from the county government, to fill the gaps that federal funding leaves behind. And we're all going to need to have the backs of every member of our community, because at the end of the day, that may be all we have.
So my approach, again, in times of crisis, I think centering those closest to the pain, right? Those that are experiencing those cuts firsthand, what do they need? Creating those feedback loops. And the people that I know have the closest feedback loops to the community are our service providers and those that are on the ground directly working with individuals and families to be able to give us and guide us. So for me, my question would be, what do we need from your standpoint or from your standpoint? Because for us, it's about responding to those needs, but we need to prioritize. And I think that going to each individual to be able to ask them, what are we going to prioritize in this moment? So some ideas I have, again, are going to be like marshaling resources to places where they are most needed and people are most impacted. And those that are, again, on the fringes, those that are one, crisis away from entering into homelessness. So prioritizing those folks is going to be really important.
Gentleman in the back here. I apologize for the squeaking of my shoes, everyone.
Thanks for a good discussion. I'm just sitting here thinking about the discussion about, excuse me, homelessness and the really serious problems we have in this community. I'm also thinking a lot about how the fact is we live in one of the richest places on the planet, and that there's a disconnect that I don't hear people really talking about. That disconnect should not be there, or at least it should not be as much as it is. I read that the city is giving away tax breaks to companies if they'll come in and build housing. That seems wrong to me. There has to be a better way of giveaways to actually help solve our problems. We need to be figuring out ways that we can get the services that we need without having to give away the store. That seems counterproductive. And I'm just wondering what you might have in mind. I'm thinking about, for instance, I've done work over the last couple of years with trying to get the U.S. government to provide housing and childcare for those companies that they're giving away billions of dollars to build new chip plants. Well, and they got into the law that a requirement for providing childcare. Now that kind of thing makes a lot of sense to me. If you're going to be giving away stuff, what are you getting in return, and what more can the city do to be able to get back some of those things that we really need? And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Well, usually when you want resources, you go to the people with the resources. And in this case, and in this valley, it's corporations, some of our biggest corporations. So again, I think, again, always going to our taxpayers and saying, we want more, we want more, we want more, and not then saying the same thing to our corporations that are operating here. I know that they call bluff sometimes and say, we're going to move to Texas. And it's like, yet they never do. And so I think, there is a balance of business friendliness, but also can we be friendly to people and people that live here and are dealing with a lot of these. We know that the costs are just skyrocketing and wages aren't keeping up. Wages aren't keeping up. So, what I've done in my own, I guess, realm of influence is made sure that, we were supporting measures if there was any sort of business tax that was going to be placed or any sort of reform in that area. We've been there weighing in on that, making sure that it doesn't always fall on us as taxpayers. So I think starting there would be a smart move.
Thank you. You mentioned, these giveaways that we give to developers to try to get them to build more housing. I think it's important to look at why we are doing that. And we're doing it because, in general, housing is just not penciling out anywhere in San Jose. Every year, the Planning Commission gets a report that looks at how much it costs to build housing versus how much developers can sell it for. And for the past several years, that report has shown that basically no type of housing is financially feasible in San Jose. And we see the end result of that. Last year, there were 0 new multifamily housing projects that broke ground in the city of San Jose. And that's why the city is leaning more into incentives here. That said, I don't think that incentives are the only solution here. I'm a big proponent of getting government out of the way of the things that we are trying to do. We can look at the process and see that it takes twice as long to entitle a housing project in California as it does in Texas. And construction takes 50% longer in California than it does in Texas. And our design standards and development guidelines mean that housing costs more to build than it does in Texas. So we need to look at the things that are within the city's control to speed up the process, bring down costs, and then hopefully that allows us to build the housing that we need without giving away the store, as you said.
Thank you, folks. We have time for 2 more. A gentleman right here up front.
Appreciate it. What's up, everyone? We hear a lot about like public safety and the need to increase public safety, use that centers like more staffing of police and increasing police. But we know crime has been down in the city, and we also have seen with our budget that the police budget's increased close to $200 million over the past few years, while other budgets have remained stagnant or decreased. And then we're talking about budget cuts, and we're looking at things like library cuts, parks and rec cuts. How do we make sense that even though staffing is low at the police department, crime is down, the budget's skyrocketing, and we're losing services that could help families and help people? How do you two make sense of that and still ensure that we're taking care of the people that need the most with the resources that we have available?
Thank you for the question. I've walked and knocked a lot of doors in District 3, and I've talked to folks in neighborhoods all across the district who've said that they basically have just stopped calling the police because they've lost faith that the police are going to be able to arrive in a timely manner. We see that borne out in the data. For the last several years, response times have been increasing, and the city's failing to meet response time targets across all different priorities of calls. So I do believe that we need to invest public safety, make sure that the police are able to respond in a timely manner when our residents need them. But you're right that shouldn't come from sacrificing other essential city services for our residents. That's part of why I actually do support filling all of the vacant budgeted positions that we have in our police force. Last year, the city spent $64 million just on overtime pay for our police force. So if we can actually manage to fill these vacancies and have, the police working normal hours instead of overtime hours, we'll be able to stretch that police budget much further, decrease response times, and increase public safety while actually having a net positive effect on our budget.
So I've been out talking to probably many of the same neighbors, but I think that it depends on how you ask the question. And I think the question that I've been asking at the doors is, what makes you feel safe? And the answer is never more police. The answer is my neighbors, my community watching out for me, the fact that we have a neighborhood watch that meets, once a month. So I think we need to lean into the things that actually do make us feel safe in moments of crisis. Obviously, our police force was gutted by former Mayor McHenry. We know this happened way before we came on board. And so I'm like, if there's vacancies, fill them, but they can't even recruit the officers, because I've talked to them. And it's like, it's not a problem of like, they're not there. It's like people don't want to be cops. So, or whatever, the process is not working out. So I think it could be a recruitment, it could be training. I haven't taken the hood off of the police department. I think in terms of efficiencies, I'll go in there and ask those questions and figure that out. But again, I think we as a community need to ask ourselves what ultimately makes us feel safe and lean into that and invest on that.
Final question. The young lady over here with the red lipstick.
Hi, my question is, given the Latino health assessment, it showed startling data showing high rates of poverty, mental health struggles, and juvenile citations among youth. And I wanted to ask, what specific steps will you, as a candidate, take to invest in spaces, programs that support youth leadership, mental health, and violence prevention in historically underserved neighborhoods?
So I would definitely lean into what I have known and have been practicing for pretty much my entire career, which again, I think I've been investing in youth leadership development, and I've been invested in, right, as a youth leader, and so look at me, here I am. But people have invested in me, and so it does take that investment. It does take that intention to say, we want to help our youth grow and form into the contributing adults that we want, for them and themselves and their families. And so for me, I think a lot of these health disparities are complex. But again, I think that we need to make sure that we're centering culture, especially when culture and identity is under attack right now, and they want to just kind of wash it all away. It's going to be more imperative than ever that our local leaders stand up and make sure that we are centering culture and experience and intersectionality and just people's lived experience in these conversations about health and health outcomes. And so leaning into many of our nonprofit leaders who are also leading in this space, many of them are here in this room.
Thank you for the question. I think first and foremost, and when we talk about supporting our youth, about all of the youth centers that we have in San Jose and the important programming and services that they provide to our youth to help keep them on track, give them a safe environment and an enriching environment to go to after school. So that would be a top funding priority for mine heading into council. And if we end up doing a parks bond next year on the ballot, would want to make sure that that parks bond also has funding included to support all of our youth centers and our community centers as community assets. When we zoom out to kind of broader health implications across the city, I think that it is important, again, to partner with the county on all of their social safety net programs and also on large-scale initiatives like the county's acquisition of Regional Medical Center. I think that's a really important acquisition to make sure that we are able to retain the services already provided at Regional and restore the services that were previously cut, especially given that it serves a predominantly lower income and minority community.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Now, our candidates will each have 90 seconds to say their closing remarks. We will be starting with Anthony.
Just want to say thank you again, everyone, for being here this evening. Again, my name is Anthony Tordillos, and if there's one message I can leave you with this evening, it's that I am laser focused on rebuilding trust with our local community and delivering results for the people of District 3. You don't have to wonder what type of council member I will be, because you can look at my track record. As chair of the Planning Commission, I've continually urged our city to think bigger and to work faster to address our housing affordability and homelessness crisis. As a neighborhood president, I've heard concerns from our neighbors about blight and safety and revitalizing our downtown community, and I've worked to bring folks together to work on those initiatives. I'm very proud of the coalition that we've built so far in this campaign. It really is a unique coalition that cuts across, some traditional battle lines in City Hall. Proud to have the endorsement of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party, leaders like Mayor Matt Mahan and Vice Mayor Pam Foley, civil rights organizations like Equality California, a growing list of our local unions, as well as every pro-housing organization that is endorsed so far in this race. We only have a couple more weeks in this race, so we really do need all hands on deck. If any of you would like to learn more about me or my campaign, or if you have questions about any of the issues that we didn't have time to get to today, I encourage you to check out my website, anthonyforsanjose.com. You can look at my platform there, shoot me an email if you have an additional question. I would love to be in touch, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you all so much for being here. As nonprofit leaders and folks that are serving our community day in and day out, you guys are in the front lines, you are in the trenches, and I know that because I've been there with you. I've been there with you over the last 20 years. I'm not going anywhere, no matter what I end up doing. As your next council person, as a community advocate, I will continue to show up for community. I will continue to be led by community. I will continue to prioritize your needs above all else, and that's the way I have always showed up. I think it's going to be important that D3 has a vocal leader that is going to stand in their values, that is going to stand firm. I think right now in particular, what is being asked of our local leaders is that they're courageous, that they are strong in their convictions, and that they are unwavering in making sure that everybody in this city is thought about and is thriving. And so I look forward to continuing to represent, continuing to serve this community that has given so much to me and my family. I am in debt and in so much gratitude as I look around the room and as I just am here, that I'm able to do the work alongside all of you. I don't have all the answers, but I am surrounded by an incredible community, and the brain trust and the people are what makes this district and this city so great. And so it would be an honor and a privilege to serve all of you in this new capacity. So I hope you will consider voting for me and telling all your friends to vote for me. And you can visit me at GabbyChavez-Lopez.com or right here, right now.
Yes, give it up for our candidates. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for all of those questions as well. I'm going to pass it back to Shannon to close the forum off.
Thank you, and excuse me, I have the loudest shoes in the room. I'm sure everyone's noticed. So candidates, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing your visions for our city's future. And of course, a special shout out to our amazing moderator, Tori, who has been absolutely wonderful at moderating today's forum. All of your time is much appreciated, and we are so happy to have you join us. Let's have another round of applause for everyone up here. And once again, a huge thank you to all of our attendees for making it out today, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and all the other sponsoring organizations. Before you go today, we have a few quick announcements. So we know everyone here today is very involved in the San Jose community, and many of you probably know that the city and county both have a lot going on as budget season is in full swing. To stay on top of the budget and more, SVCN's policy newsletter gives high-level analyses and updates on local policy happenings. In this newsletter, we cover everything from city council and county board meetings, federal actions. We analyze budget documents, we track state legislation, so there's something in there for everyone. So if you're interested, please subscribe to these weekly policy updates. We try our best to get it out on Friday, although the success of that is variable. You can subscribe by visiting our website at svcn.org. And as many of you are aware as well, this is a difficult time for the nonprofit community as we face a volatile federal environment. SVCN has a new resource page on our website with federal actions tracking and updates, as well as tools and resources to strengthen your organizational resilience. This new page includes expert advice on legal and HR compliance, scenario planning, financial resilience, along with local and national updates to help your organization adapt to these challenging conditions. So be sure to check it out. It's also at svcn.org. And many of you are already members of SVCN, but for those of you who are not yet, please do consider joining our nonprofit alliance. Being a member further connects you to us and a community of over 170 peer organizations. You'll also get access to our SVCN community Slack, where we post priority funding alerts and information and can connect with the nonprofit community at large. If you're interested, you can email my colleague Dana at danae@svcn.org. It's also up there. And you also should check out the website. And finally, as a nonprofit association, we want to be as accessible to you all as best as possible. So please reference the information here if you'd like to contact our team. Your feedback and suggestions really help us put on events like this, and we really value what you have to say. Before we conclude, I'd like to give a final shout out to AACSA's team for helping us put on this event. And this concludes our candidate forum. Thank you so much for joining us today.